Check, check, 1, 2. Is this the mic? How are we doing? There we go. Give that a try. Check, check, 1, 2. Hello, 1, 2.
Is that doing anything? It sounds.
Yep. Oh, there you go. I'll probably actually talk louder than that. So anyway, so.
I can turn that down just a tad then. So that should be a good volume level for you.
Okay.
Yeah, all of our videos on the talk channel are way too quiet. So
I'm trying to.
yeah, I don't know. If this winds up being an issue, send it to me and I can normalize the audio after the fact.
A way to get this full screen projection. I thought so. Yeah. Oh. Yeah, full screen. Projector source, and then do that first one. There you go. Oh, you just need to flip them. There. Oh, yep. There it is. Hey, there we go.
We should now be good after.
Okay. All right. Well, if we need to pause for anything, just let me know. All right. Let's learn about Squib. So, all right. So, thank you so much for coming tonight. I really appreciate it, and it's really meaningful to me that you guys like thought of me and knew about this because this is like a good, well-kept secret that I do this for fun, although I think I bring it up in lecture probably a few too many times. So I love board games. I have been, playing my whole life, and I've been designing board games as a hobby for my whole life. I love them. I actually learned how to program because I wanted to learn AI in middle school to play more board games. And yeah, and then fast forward, I got a PhD in it, and no, actually in high school and stuff, I used to do like I made a thing that played Mancala, and I played Othello and a bunch of other things, and so anyway, I was programming actually came from my love of board games. So then later on, I decided I was working on some games, and I started to do it a little bit more seriously, and when you think about a board game, there is a lot of stuff to put together. So if you think about a typical board game, will have like a deck of cards, you'll have some chits, you'll have a board, you'll have lots of pieces, you'll have instructions, you have all kinds of stuff, right? And the key is to be like really consistent with your artwork and your icons and everything. And when you think about putting all that together, it is an organizational just nightmare. So what I used to do, and it was super janky, is I used to use GIMP. I don't know if you ever used GIMP, the Photoshop, open source Photoshop analog. And I would have like for a deck of custom cards, I would have like one layer that was like the template, and then like every layer would be a different card, and like you'd hide one layer and enable another, and like it was such a terrible way to do things. And I found that I would change. Like I would avoid making game design decisions so that because changing all the cards at once would just be too much work. And I realized, wow, that's really bad. So I started automating it a little bit, and for a while I did it in Java, and I just had some scripts that around. And then eventually, when I got the job here, we were teaching in SWEN 250. It actually used to be 350, and we were teaching Ruby, and so I had to learn Ruby because I didn't know it before coming here, and I just fell in love with it. It's my favorite language ever. Even it makes me sad that it's not in 250 anymore. It might come back, probably won't, but hopefully we'll put some other stuff in there. And then so Squib is kind of the outcome of all that. So Squib is it's 8 years old now because it's the same age as my daughter. One of the first commits to the repository may or may not have been from the hospital when my daughter was born. Look, people do various things when they're stressed out. I code, so I started. It's as old as my daughter. And so I just started working on it. And actually, honestly, it was at a really stressful time in my life in terms of my job here and everything, and research, and I was pre-tenure and everything. And so then I started working on it, and about 6 months later, I put it out, and people online loved it. So there's a big community of board game designers on BoardGameGeek.com. That's one big place. And so I put it out there, and people loved it, and it's gotten like featured on podcasts. It's had blog entries. There's been like hackathons where people like discovered it and used it. So there's like videos of it. A month or two ago, it was on like a Ruby newsletter thing. So I saw my Google Analytics for the docs like spike. I get about one day it went on Hacker News, and it now has 800 stars on GitHub, and it's got on Google Analytics, I get about 1,000 users a year, unique users a year, on the docs. So not just this front page, but the actual documentation where people are looking stuff up. So people actually use this, and I get a fair number of pull requests. It's mostly just me, but okay. So what I figured I'd do tonight is I don't have slides or anything like that. I put together some cards last night, and we're gonna put it together here. And then we'll actually even do something where you can actually edit the cards as we go, because we'll use Google Sheets. We'll see how that goes. All right, so here's my text editor. So this is VS Code, and blank thing. So the way that you do this in Ruby, and I'll explain a little bit of Ruby as we go. But here's how it works. So if I want to use Squib, I just say require Squib. And then the main data structure that it uses is um, a deck. So it's so I believe it's Squib deck new. And then the one thing that might be look a little different is that this do end here. This is actually like an anonymous function. It's a block is what they call it in Ruby, but it's like an anonymous function or a lambda if you're familiar with that. Let's make the background color. Wow, typing is hard. Background color white. So yeah, I could just use the word white here, but you can also put in hexadecimal and all that. And then I'm going to do, of course, text string hello world. And then I'm going to save these out to ping files, okay? So you can see that this is just a very basic hello world, and I'm going to run that. Deck.rb. I prepared in true cooking show fashion. I've prepared this ahead of time. You can see that it builds out, and it built out a card called hello world, okay? So this is a ping file. I can save this to a ping. I can save it to a PDF. I can save it to an SVG. I can save it to a sheet of pings. The dimensions for that are actually the default dimensions for at 300 pixels per inch, 2.5 by 3.5 inches, and then plus a little bit of bleed. So this actually works for a service called the Game Crafter, which is a print-on-demand service that a lot of board game designers use. That you can upload your artwork and they print it and you get a copy and it's like professionally made and everything. So a lot of people use it. So I made all the defaults kind of based around their templates. But I actually have built-in templates for all of the other services that use this. So okay, that's pretty boring. But the thing is, you're always going to have more than one card. So let's actually, just for now, let's actually add 2 cards. So let's just say that we have 2 cards here, and if I rerun this, it's going to, I'm now going to have card 0 and card 1. So I put hello world on each one, right? But let's say that I don't want to have an entire deck that is all the same. So I want to have it be different for each card. So I'm going to put this into an array and just put hello and world into elements of an array. So again, you know, even if you don't know Ruby, like this looks like all the code you've ever seen in the world. And so hello and world, those are on 2 separate cards. So that's a key thing that's the way Squib works is that if you give a single thing to it for every single option, and there are probably over 100 now, if you give it a single thing, it'll put it on everything. If you give it an array, it'll lay it out to each element of the array. And Ruby is really relaxed about stuff. So like you can give it nils a lot and it won't give you nil exceptions. It'll just not do things. And so in general, if I said like, oh, there are 3 cards and it's hello world, and then it'll go off the end of the array. No, it doesn't. Like Ruby doesn't care. It's like, oh, well, if you went off the end of the array, then that's just a nil. So like, I'm just going to count that as not. Yeah.
What if it's less words than cards? Right, more words than cards.
More words than cards? So then in that case, if I just said that this was, for example, 1, it then does, it actually just builds the 1. Like anything that's off the end of it, it just builds it. It just doesn't build it. So actually, I guess the output is the same, but if it would just not print out those. So okay, so that's one of the key things. But so when you're working in a game, you're usually thinking about things in different modes. So there's sometimes where I'm in like spreadsheet mode, and there are times where I'm trying to figure out like, okay, I want to give this one this many hit points. I want to calculate the attack based on this thing, and like so there's times when you're in like game designer spreadsheet mode, and so you want to a lot of times I put the data in spreadsheets. But then there are other times where you're like, oh, I want to like move this over here and set the font to this, and so I tried to design Squib around like being in different mental states. So this state of Ruby is like putting it all together. You can have the text method itself has tons of. So I use read the docs for the documentation. I highly recommend read the docs if you're not familiar. Oops. Text. I think text is actually the most complicated one. So you can see string font X, Y. Should we use markup? How do I wrap? How do I do ellipses? What do you do when you end the thing? Stroke width. You can have it outlined in dashes. You can use it. The graphics engine that this uses is Cairo, and that's the same graphics engine that like Chrome uses to like draw things on the screen. So it's the graphics library for GNOME as well. So it's a real graphics library that I use, and then for text I also use Panga, which is the text version of it. You can also embed icons in it, so like you can say like, okay, here's a text, and then every time I have the word tool, I'm going to replace that with an actual like image, and that's a really common thing in games, right? So like trade one meat for one tool or whatever. And I just have the colons here just because that's convention. All right. But the thing is like once you like, so you can keep going with this. You can say like, okay, so like font, let's just call this Exo 18. And actually alt tabbing it back and forth is really annoying. In Ruby, there's a tool called guard, bundle exec guard. And I set it up so that this is now going to watch all of my files, and if something changes, it will automatically rebuild. So I won't have to alt-tab out of this, unless something goes wrong, in which case I'll alt-tab over there. I guess it's not alt-tab, it's command-tab, because this is a Mac, but you guys know what I mean. So like, all right, I want to make this 36-point font. Okay, so there you go. So I find that when I'm working on this, it's really nice, and I really like the way VS Code has it, where like it'll automatically update files and image files and stuff as you go. All right, let's do something a little bit more interesting. Well, actually, let me show you. Let's see. Should I do data or layouts? Let's do data. So putting everything into arrays is annoying to do in Ruby, and so that's why you want to work in a spreadsheet. Most of the time, I actually do things in Excel. Tonight, we're going to do it in Google Sheets. So here's a little bit of code to bring things in from that. So HTTP Party is a really good library for downloading stuff. I have a Google Sheets URL that I just didn't want to check into the repo because it's public. And download the thing, raise an exception if it's wrong, save it to data/sse.csv, and then I can parse the CSV, right? So Squib is now going to parse this CSV, and it's going to give a data object, and that data object it's a data frame. So if you're familiar with R is a popular data science tool. The way data frames work, it's like a spreadsheet where you can look at things in terms of a row, but most things are like column based. So I'm going to set up my spreadsheet so that every row means a card, and every column is something that we're going to put on the card. So now let's actually take a look at this. Let's actually, first of all, does this actually run? Okay, yeah, so it's actually running, so I didn't break anything. So the spreadsheet that I have is actually here. And so I just have two things, Vikings, ninjas, right? And there's a name, a description, and then there's this icon here. I'll get to that in a moment. So instead of saying text string, I can do data. Instead of giving an array, instead of hard coding the array, I can get it from the data. So I can say data.name. And you can see here, there's Vikings. And so I can then do, I can change it, and it changed, right? So, and then you can. So I want to put in a description. Oh, and by the way, so maybe I don't want. Okay, so that's Okay, so that's the data aspect of it. I'm going to give you all access to this in just a moment, and we'll make something together. I think that'll be fun. But let me show you one more thing with it can get really annoying to have all of those options in your code, especially because like once you start editing code and it's like, okay, I got to do the X, I got to do the Y, I got to do the width and the height and the stroke color and all these things, and figuring out all the style it really reminds you a lot of editing HTML and CSS. So for those of you who have taken WebEng, or if you've just done a little bit of that, the brilliant thing about, or at least the goal of HTML and CSS, is that you have style in one file and you have structure in the other file, right? And I actually feel like I like that separation in general, because when I am working on the structure of the page, I'm in HTML, and when I'm thinking about colors and align left and things like that, that's in CSS. So those are different mental modes for me. And so I decided to do something similar for this, and I call them a layout. So every method in Squib has a layout option, and you can essentially set the layout. This is essentially equivalent to like style or class in HTML and CSS. So in this case, I put it in. So I have all of my layouts there in YAMLs, and so I have a YAML file in here. So here's one where I set things in the right place. Let me just do that real quick. Data.name, and I'm just going to say layout name. So that set it to what I wanted. It looks the way I want. So I'm going to bring over. Here's the part of the show that's a cooking show, where I'm just going to bring over something. So this is the description, but actually I don't have the description in here. So you'll notice that in the warning it'll say I don't know what description is. One of the key things with Squib is it does its best to warn you, but most of the time it will still like not break. And the idea is that it's like, I'm going to do the best I can, but if it doesn't work, I'm still just going to, not being able to put the description out there in the right font is not the end of the world. Let's not break the build for it. So let's put in a description. So here is my description. And in fact, I'm just going to copy in all of the other styles I was going to do for the night. Last night when I was working on this, I was like nudging things kind of left and right. I was using, I was also using the safe zone and cut zone, which are built-in defaults for, so cut zone is where so this is defined by the game crafter, where they say, we promise to cut it here, but don't put anything important after this blue dotted line, so make sure you do it in this dotted line. So that way, so you can see I have Vikings right up in the stairs. So that way it's, so this is what we call full bleed, and then you're just trying to account for drift, right? Okay, so now it's making a card there. That color, white, is lame. Let's pick a trendier color. I like to use, you can go anywhere and find a good color palette. There's actually social networks of color palettes. Did you know this? This is awesome. Coolers is one of them, but there's a bunch of them where like there are 58,000 people who think that's a cool color scheme. So let's go for that. Let's go for something that looks a little bit like that. And so I can make it like that. I might need to put the pound in. I don't think I actually need to put the pound in. It darkened a little bit. And then you can, but that's just text. Let's put in something a little bit more interesting. Let's actually do, let's put some artwork in here. So I can put in a file, and what I'm going to do here is, so I could do a couple of things. I could, in my data, I could say like, hey, the art file is going to be, art file is going to be, vikings.png, right? That would be, we could totally do that, and then we could do data.name, or we could actually do that. Data, art file, and do that, and there's that. I generated that last night on Dolly, because I am not an artist, and in fact we can actually do that if you like in a moment here. You can actually, so there you go. So there are Vikings on a stormy ship in there. Okay, so but one of the things that is important about like the Ruby philosophy that I think applies here is So Ruby, the community is a big believer in. They created this term, convention over configuration. So what that means is is that nobody likes editing config files, especially ones that seem really redundant. It's better to just name things super consistently and everything just connects to each other. So rather than calling it an art file with vikings.png, why not just call it Vikings and just make it that name? And so therefore there should be a file called vikings.png. So first of all, that's going to go away because art file is not a thing. Or maybe it is. I don't know. Let's see. And so what I'm going to do here is I actually have this image saved in here called vikings.ping. And here what I'm doing is data. Let me boost the font a little bit on that. There we go. Okay. I did data.name.map. So whoa, that's a fun. That's not doing that on my screen. Oh, interesting. Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. So what this is doing is this is taking, so name is an array of names, and then map is execute this little function on every element of the array. So Ruby does have for loops, but nobody ever uses them. That's how you know that the person's not a Ruby programmer, is if they use for loops in Ruby, because everything uses iterator, or in this case, this is using map. So the parameter here is going to be n for name, and then this string here this is string interpolation here. So and then downcase means change it to lowercase. So now if I put in an image and see I have Vikings. I guess I don't have other ones in here, but if we came up with another one and we named it something else, it would also do that. Okay, so there's that. Is this actually working? Yeah, it's still working. Yeah. But you'll notice that it's looking for ninjas.ping, and we don't have ninjas.ping, so we can actually generate that. All right, so then the other thing that's going on here is it has this icon. So let's get some icons in here. So in this case, you can load SVGs. So you can load pings and SVGs. You generally don't load JPEGs because JPEGs are lossy, and you don't usually put those into games because you want every pixel to be under your control. So board game designers don't usually do that. So I could just get an SVG of an icon that I really like for example this crossbow, and I could just put that in, and that's what I do for a lot of my games. But when I'm really just trying to think of something and I just want to put in something that is quick, I use this thing called game icons. Now this is actually a different Ruby gem that I also put out, but it's based on this website called gameicons.net. And it's just a really good website with free icons and everything. Extra credit if you can find the ones that I made. I contributed, I think, 2 to this thing. So for example, I can put, and so what this does is this actually has the entire database of gameicons.net into this gem, and so I could call it, instead of calling it crossbow, I could call it haunting. Let's go with that. And it's got the little haunting thing. I can also change the colors to whatever I want, so I can recolor it to, something that's a slightly different color, which that doesn't look any different. But you can change colors based on things. All right, so that's one icon, and that's just on everything in there. So let's actually get the icon based on the art up here. So you'll see that in our spreadsheet, we've got the 2 things are Drakkar and Running Ninja. So let's copy that over to here, and that is, there we go. and you can see that it's got the little ship symbol up there, and then for Vikings, and then for ninjas. One thing that we didn't do is all the way along the way, I only said that I only have one card in my deck. I actually want to change this to the number of cards that are in my deck, so I can do it's data.nrows, number of rows, and rows. And there's ninjas, right? So at this point, I'm going to show you some more stuff, but let's have some fun with this. So if you're not in the SSE Slack, you should join the SSE Slack, because this now has, hang on, everyone with a link can edit. There you go. So go ahead and add whatever cards you want. Just add another row to the bottom. I'm seeing people jump in already. Feel free to put in an icon. I'll hit run every once in a while. You'll see them come up. So one of the things you can do is that one of the things that happens is that you make a card, but then there are times when you want to use that card in like your instructions, and you want to use that, and you might have a card in like your marketing materials, and you just need that image in multiple places. Sometimes you need it if you want to make like a print and play version. So there's a whole community of people who take PDFs of games, download them, print them out, and play them. And these are games that are just not, you don't even have to pay for them. They're just print and play. And so if you want to compile that into that, so you can actually save this in multiple ways. I said down here save ping, but I can also do save sheet. In fact, here, let me use the options that I have down here. Save sheet. And so now this is actually going to save. Did I kill it? Did not find icon. 4 dot. Okay. I'm going to actually disable it for. Interesting. I'm just going to disable that for a moment. As fun as that is. All right, so yeah, here we go. So we have 8 cards, and okay, so we have sheets. We now have a whole bunch of things. So this is now a sheet of cards. Now, what's great about this is that here I have 2 columns, 2 rows. Let's actually do like 4 columns and 4 rows. I also have it. I give it a margin around the edge, but I can also trim it. So you'll notice that I actually trimmed it. In fact, 37.5 pixels is 1/8 of an inch, which is the bleed here. So those red lines that you saw earlier, that's now being cut. So these cards look like how they would look in real life. I can even actually do a rounded corner. There you go. So you can see, yeah, people are making student, tiger, goblin, barbarian, wolf. Love it. Write descriptions in these. Let's make an actual game. Let's come up with something. And let's do it in 3 rows so we can see it a little bit better. So what are some other things we can do here? All right, so I also asked, let's do this. Let's put the Viking ship. I guess the Viking ship is in there. Let's do, so I also asked Dali to give me this looks a little clean. And because this is like a gritty, let's just say this is a gritty game. So let's go and get a grit. And so I asked Dali to give me a gritty texture. That's a gritty texture. And so I saved that, and that's called grit.ping. So I'm just going to copy that over, and so now I can do that. And actually, I'm going to have that be on top. My indentation is all weird. There we go. And what that's going to do is it's going to it's really hard to see. I swear it's much clearer on mine. That might be better. I can also change the alpha to a lot more to be kind of ridiculous. Let's do like 75. So what's cool is that you can do. I can you know, I set the alpha channel and it overlays. Okay, and then there's actually, if you're familiar with Photoshop or GIMP or anything, they have these things called blending modes, and so there's actually an overlay option which will like it'll actually like there's dodge and burn and there's all kinds of stuff. Let's see if that actually updates. It might not be watching that YAML file. So, or maybe that is what it looks like. I don't know. Anyway, so let's see. Deck. Let's bring it back down to like 35, and I think the overlay might actually be a little harsh as well. But so you can see that there's so like what I love about a good tool is that like it just gets out of your way, and if I ever wanted to, let's say I wanted to have the name all of a sudden be aligned to the right instead of the left, I can then move I can move all of my things over to the. There we go. Yeah, it moved them all the way over to the right. Now I actually kept this space open for the icon that's there, so I actually already set that. So there are times when I just want to mess around with like moving things around, and then there are other times where I actually want to think about the game. And so now that I know that I can build all these cards, I can go back to this thing and I can just start adding stuff. Now let's see if I can get the actual icon from Game Icons working again. That'd be really cool. We might actually need to do. It didn't like the empty field, so and also let's turn off the grid thing. That looks a little weird. See, you can change your mind all. Let's see, what did the outputs say? Could not find icon wolf. But I did actually. We can do walk. So let's change that to walk instead of wolf. I know that's not the same thing, but that's funny to me. Let's see. Did it actually fail in this? Okay. So, and one of the things that I did, so I remember I made the Game Icons library too, and this is really simple, but I did add a "Did you mean" thing to it, which was really fun to do. I got to do a longest common substring. It was actually really fun. So anyway, all right, let's do Goo Skull. You already did it. Thank you. Hey, we got everybody's icons. So there you go. Now we got all these icons, right? Let's see. What else did I want to show you? Yes, you can save them into sheets. You can save them into PDFs. Oh, yes. Here's another one. So let's say you want to make it look like it was made by Apple. I have this thing called Showcase. Come on, Showcase. Okay, and it actually might be with this many cards. It might could not find. Let's see. All right, I'm just gonna fix JJ to Ant real quick, just because I can. It's the internet. Sheets, Showcase. Oh, come on, give me a Showcase. There it is. Oh, okay. All right. So let's see if I can make that look prettier. Okay. So instead of doing all of the cards, I just want to showcase the first two cards. So I can do 0.2. So that's actually going to be the first three cards because computers. And then I need to put a comma there. Showcase. There we go. Right? See, now it looks like we actually knew what we were doing. It looks all pretty, right? You can also, I think I have one called Hand. I have a couple of these. Hand. I think I could just give it all the same options, actually. So you notice so like trim, you'll see that it actually is cut at that red line. So like we have space outside of the bleed, but it actually cuts in the red at the red line. And so you can, so hands. Yeah, there it is. Hand. Yeah. So now you can see what our cards look like. That would be awesome. Actually, I think there is a hand, right? So I think let's see. Let's make a hand. And shows a hand. And if you go over to game icons, we can search for hand. Just hand is okay. There's actually multiple. Let's go with hand okay. That seems cool. So yeah, like so you can see how like this is it's super fun to come up with different ideas and stuff. So okay, so I a quick plug. I think this is just about everything I wanted to show you. So here are all the things that you can do in Squib. You can I have build groups where you can like organize things, or you can turn on one thing or not. You can specify gradients. Oh yes, that was one thing that I did in here. You can specify a gradient over it. So anywhere that you can specify a color, you can also specify a gradient. So a gradient would look like deck. Oh, of course, the capture card. Yeah, of course. That's the other character here. Yeah. So like I can. So this is instead of a color of I can actually set it to be an actual gradient. So like from 0, 0 to 825, 1125, that's just the other corner. So that would be a diagonal gradient. Actually, let's see if that I actually. Let's see. There we go. And there. Let's see if that actually works. Yeah, there we go. That looks a little. See, gradients. It's what separates us from the animals. And then like there's a bunch of other things you can do. Oh, so everywhere that you specify, so all of my coordinates in here, think in terms of pixels, because that's the most precise thing that you can do, because that's ultimately what we're doing is we're rendering pixels. But if in case you don't have things like 37.5 is 1/8 of an inch, like I do, you can actually just instead say 0.25 inches. And so basically a Squib knows that everywhere, or here I can even say the icon is, well, actually yeah, you can see some of these already. So for example, so what Squib does is if it sees a number, it just thinks it's pixels. If it sees a string, it applies various regular expressions to figure out what it is. And in this case, if it's Y and I say deck minus 275, that means 275 pixels from the right. So that way I can change the size of my cards without having to redo all of my coordinates. I also have a couple places where it's middle, so that's width divided by 2 and subtract that from x, and I don't know, it's math, but I only had to figure it out once. That's the thing, is that like if you have unit tests, you only need to do math problems once. If there's one thing that you take away from tonight, it's that you only have to do math problems once if you have unit tests. Okay, so let's see, anything else? So I could show you more features. So one of the games that I use. So I can show you a little bit so I'd make about a game a year for the last 15 years. Some of them are a lot more done than others. There's one that I've been working on off and on for years. I have pitched it to publishers. I might pitch it to publishers again. I don't know that I want to, but it actually has its own websites, mastersoftheheist.com. It's if the Italian Job was if Ocean's 11 the Italian Job was a game, it's a cooperative heist game. But I made all these in Squib. So you can see there's the showcase, right? You can see that you've got fancy things like drop shadows. I added drop shadows, so it looks like it's actually there. And then all of this artwork is artwork that I put together. But all of these things are in spreadsheets, and it handles and it figures everything out that I need. So for example, if I decided to change what Smash is, maybe Smash involves 2 arrows, not 1 arrow, whatever that means. I just go into the spreadsheet, I change it once, it updates in every single on one sheet. It updates on all the other sheets that reference that thing Smash, and then it updates in that. So like I even though it seems like it's a lot of work to like do all of this, it really just opens up your mind to actually think about the game, which is what I really like about it. Yeah, that's that. Oh, I also in order to learn React for 344, I made a level designer for Masters of the Heist. I think for those of you who've taken my class, I might have actually shown that to you. But yeah, so you can do anything that anything that you want. Things that I've learned from Squib in general is like I don't know. I feel like everything is something driven development, but I'll call it documentation driven development. So when I was first making Squib, I basically made an example of what I want, and then I made that a unit test, and then I copied that into the documentation. So like I have this directory here of a lot of samples, and all of these samples are actual regression tests. So I have text, and then I have anything that is underscore in expected.png. This is what the example is supposed to give. Now I know that's ugly and whatever, but these are all test cases that I specifically have done. And in fact, you can see that bug number 103 really annoyed me. So that's why that particular test case is Nemesis bug 103. Can't remember what that was. It had to do with embedding icons. My least favorite feature of. I mean, I love having the feature, but implementing the feature is a pain in the ass. So yeah. So having unit tests really makes me like it makes so like I've been doing this now for 8 years. If you've ever worked on anything for 8 years, and I doubt any of you have worked on anything for 8 years, like you pick it up, you put it down, and then you feel guilty for not working on it, and then you pick it up, and I'm really proud of this, that I can pick it up and get things done like super quickly, and like I can have an idea and add it to Squib in one night. Like I'm that productive with Ruby, and there's enough unit tests and there's enough things that I know I'm not going to break anything. So like it can be like I'll put it down for 6 months, and then one night I'll just say, I'll see like someone will send me a message on Board Game Geek and go like, hey, it would be really nice if you allowed, if you allowed me. A recent one was, it would be really nice if I could rotate the card when you save it. So like you save it in this thing, but then you save it in that thing because reasons. Actually, a reason for that one was since the pandemic, there's a popular board game tool called Tabletop Simulator. There are a couple of them, Tabletopia as well, which is a 3D like Unity kind of thing where you are literally moving pieces around. The game, it doesn't actually enforce game rules, but it's just a board game for you to play board games online. And as you can imagine, in lockdown, everybody was using that. You can use Squib is perfect for building all the assets for that because you can spit everything out into sheets and then import it right into the Tabletop Simulator. So I actually had it where I used on Masters of the Heist, you can make a change, commit it to the Masters of the Heist repository. GitHub Actions will run Squib, build it into a set of sprite sheets, and then Tabletop Simulator will automatically update those sprite sheets, and it'll show up in the game moments later. Yeah.
Were you able to send all the parts of it that you need for Git as well?
The way I did it is, at least Tabletop Simulator needed to have the built version of the cards hosted somewhere, so I used GitHub Pages, which is on GitHub Pages you say this repository is a website, and it's then a website, and so then the Tabletop Simulator just knows a URL for the asset, and it just downloads the texture, and if you save and reload, it automatically updates. So like I could make a change in my spreadsheet, and within a few minutes, it would actually show up in the game that I'm playing online with my friends. Because inevitably, when you're making a game, people break it like immediately, right? Like they I have a lot of gamer friends, and they find the exploit in your rules very fast, and so it's nice to be able to like update a thing right then and there. So I think that's all I wanted to go over, I guess. Questions? Yeah, Freddie.
Do you have any example of people using it
Yes. So okay. So there's all right. So there was a project called Paperize.io. Is that they were a startup that and they contacted me. Oh, they don't exist. Oh, they do exist. Okay. So these guys actually got in touch with me saying that they really like Squib and they wanted to make their own web version of it. And now the actual I'm trying to remember if there are any games that have come out of this. This doesn't actually use Squib. This uses their own thing and it doesn't involve coding. So that's a big difference between them and me. But maybe I have some examples of I might have it on here. So an update. Do I have Squib in the wild? I feel like I had something that said Squib in the wild. I can't remember. There have been projects that have used it. Nothing that's recognizable. But yeah. Yeah, it's been really fun to see. Oh yeah.
So you said it's like Nandex but with Ruby. When you say are you like how do you compare this? Like code versus content versus
Yeah. I actually could probably change it because I don't know that Nandek is Nandek still going? Oh yeah, it is still going. Okay, so Nandek I used to use Nandek before I made Squib, and then so Nandek is a Windows only program used for game inventors, and it's closed source, and I think it's closed source, and it's only for Windows, and it uses a custom programming language. And I hated their custom programming language. And I the whole time I was working in Nandek, I was like, oh, Ruby's got a great method for this. Like they don't have map, right? Like, so if I have an array and I want to change an array to a thing, you got to use a for loop or whatever. And so the whole time when I had the idea, like while I was for work learning Ruby, I was doing this for fun in Nandek, and then. I mean, traumatized is a little much. Oh, look, new gradients directive. I did that 5 years ago. Good job, guys. You're catching up. Range. Yeah. Anyway, sorry. Yeah. I mean, I liked it. I like the idea of it. I love like automating and rapid prototyping. But I just wanted to do it in Ruby. Yeah.
People aren't like
I don't know, but I don't want to live in that reality. Like, I don't know. Like, I actually, so I haven't really gotten into like networking with board game design people and companies and stuff just because I have a demanding job. Yeah, I've always been curious what they do at like the professional level. I imagine that if I worked with a publisher, eventually they would just want everything in Photoshop files. But the prototyping phase would just be so miserable. I mean, I did it for years, for at least 5 years, where I had giant GIMP files with lots and lots of layers and one layer per card. And it was just, and it happens so frequently on the board game design Reddit and on Board Game Geek where people go like, is there any tools to like, it seems like there's a better way to do this. I'd like something like mail merge, but in GIMP. Is there a mail merge for GIMP? And then people recommend Nandek and Squib and a bunch of others. So, yeah.
so I remember you using like some kind of like game icons, and so that game icons is that like automatically like set up for you?
So the way that I do it is it's a separate Ruby gem, and every time game icons updates, which is maybe once a month or so, I just update the gem. I could have the gem contact game icons directly and download. It works fine the way it is now. So sometimes my gem will be a little bit behind them, but gem, like external library. So in Ruby, an external library is called a gem.
Oh, so it's not like calling the game icons API or anything.
It's not calling their API. They say that they're going to make an API, but that was a few years ago. They haven't. Actually, I think they recently, maybe not recently, but I think they changed over to GitHub, so I could actually use. I use. Actually, no, I do hit their API, but I hit their API as just part of an update, download everything thing, because they do actually have an API. Because if you go, or at least their URLs are pretty meaningful. So like up here, it's like like one by one, and then there's a few you can set these things in the parameters, and because in on game icons you can actually recolor all of this stuff. So like you can actually mod it because it's just an SVG, and they have their own editors for it. Yeah. That's kind of what this is. Yeah, recolor is kind of the version of this. Yeah, I use the game icon API really, or my gem really in the early stages when I just want to get something in. I don't want to think about icons, but honestly, I go to I'll actually I still have some icons that I use for my game icons, but eventually I like to just use some of my own. I have some of my own that I use and stuff. Or Dolly, yeah, which that's going to change everything. That's awesome. So. Yeah. So here, let's actually do this. Let's do what's a card that people did. Let's do logical NAND, literally used for everything. Photorealistic, because that's really important. Realistic. Logical NAND gate used for everything. Attacking. I don't know. Let's see what happens. That's great. I can use that. That's really interesting. I was expecting something far more terrifying.
I wonder if removing the literally used for everything would help it. Make it so, like a NAND gate that's actually attacking.
Photorealistic logical NAND gate attacking its users. Anyway, I could do this all night, and I have. Actually, think I'm. Yeah, that's great. That's great. So I think the other thing that I found that I really like AI art for this kind of thing is I have found this weird effect that if I just make cards that are just placeholders and I tell people, yeah, these are just placeholders, people treat the game a certain way. But if I just put artwork on it and I put a little bit of effort into making it look a little nicer, people take the game way more seriously. So what I like about this is that like I can put something in here that is honestly like let's face it, board game art is not famous for being good. AI art actually could totally take over board game art in most cases. So this is a nice way for me to like make my prototype look good. I mean, look like that. I love that it's N. It's like NID. Yeah.
I want to know what that dude's arm is doing, phasing from one thing to the next.
Well, and like the legs are on the thing, and there's a reflection, like he's running on a mirror. Like I love how the AI was. Yeah, I love how the AI was like. Anyway. All right. So there you go. Any other questions? All right. Well, I thank you again for letting me talk your ear off about this. Have a good night. Yes. Very quickly, one of the things I found is that there are a whole lot more game designers who want to learn how to program than programmers who want to learn game design. And what people like about Squib is that it's easy to learn, and Ruby is a great first language to learn. I mean, I think if it was more popular, it would be, we would replace Python in a heartbeat if Python wasn't It's so easy to learn, and I would say it's a great language to learn just from scratch anyway. So if you've already done any other programming, Ruby is really not. And like the part of the reason that I like it is that like Ruby is it's very consistent, and it gets out of your way. It lets you the idea, the guy who made it, Yukihiro Matsumoto, he's Japanese, and a lot of the folks who make Ruby are Japanese. They said that programming should be a delight. That was one of their like mantras. That like programming should be fun, and so we should make a language where programming is fun.